Italy is once again at the center of Europe's migration fight, and the reason is simple: geography. When the Mediterranean route heats up, Italy becomes the front door. And when the pressure spikes, politically, socially, and emotionally, Rome reaches for harder tools. This week, the Meloni government approved a new migration bill that, if Parliament passes it, would give authorities the power to impose what it calls a naval blockade to stop vessels from entering Italian territorial waters during periods of exceptional pressure or when officials claim there's a serious threat to public order or national security. The proposal would allow bans for up to 30 days and extend them for months in certain circumstances. Supporters hear that and say, finally, a government treating border control like a real national security responsibility, not like an annual emergency that everyone pretends is temporary. Critics hear it and say, this is a euphemism for pushing the problem out of sight, while increasing risk at sea and criminalizing rescue. The bill also includes harsher penalties, like heavy fines and possible confiscation of ships, especially aimed at NGO rescue vessels accused of breaking rules. It also strengthens deportation and expulsion options, including faster removal for foreigners convicted of certain crimes. The message from Rome is clear: fewer arrivals, fewer pull factors, and a more aggressive posture on enforcement. So what is Italy trying to achieve strategically? First, deterrence. The government wants smugglers and migrant boats to believe that the probability of reaching Italy is lower than before. This is classic border strategy. If arrival looks harder and the consequences look harsher, fewer people attempt the crossing. Second, political credibility. Migration has been one of Meloni's defining issues. A visible, hard line is not just policy, it's a promise being cashed in publicly. In democratic politics, perception matters. Even a small policy shift can be framed as, we took back control, and that framing can be worth more than the operational impact. Third, leverage with Europe. Italy has long argued that it's unfair for frontline states to carry the burden. As the EU moves towards stricter asylum and deportation rules, and Italy wants to shape the direction and prove it's setting the pace rather than begging for help. Now let's talk about the good arguments, the best case for why many Italians and many Europeans support this approach. 1. The state has a legitimate duty to control its borders. If citizens think borders are porous, trust collapses, not only in migration policy, but in institutions overall. And when trust collapses, extreme politics grows. 2. Italy has absorbed repeated waves of arrivals for years. Even when annual arrival totals go down, the system still deals with housing, asylum processing, social services, policing, and long-term integration. Supporters argue that a government cannot run a stable welfare state if it cannot manage who enters and under what rules. 3. This plan fits a broader European trend: more external border enforcement, more safe country logic, more offshoring experiments, and more deportation capacity. In that sense, Italy isn't an outlier, it's a preview. But now the bad arguments, the risks, the contradictions, and the likely blowback. First, legality and implementation. Declaring a naval blockade raises tough questions under international maritime law and refugee protections. Opponents argue you can't just treat every boat as a security threat without building a legal and operational framework that survives court scrutiny. And Italy has already seen legal challenges around offshore processing efforts, so a big headline policy can get stuck in judicial reality fast. Second, the humanitarian and moral hazard problem. If enforcement pushes boats to take riskier routes or delays rescues, the human cost can rise. Even if the government's goal is deterrence, the sea doesn't negotiate. Storms don't care about policy. The risk is that politics writes a tough message, and the Mediterranean enforces it on human bodies. Third, targeting rescue NGOs can backfire. Supporters say some NGOs unintentionally create incentives by meeting boats closer to departure points and acting as a safety net. Critics say NGOs are being scapegoated for a problem created by wars, poverty, state collapse, and smuggling networks. Either way, If you punish rescues without simultaneously dismantling smuggling operations and creating lawful pathways, you can end up with fewer rescues and the same demand to flee. Fourth, who is really responsible? This is where public debate gets toxic. The real upstream drivers include organized smuggling networks, instability and violence in origin or transit regions, and the political incentives in Europe that reward toughness more than functional long-term integration policy. In other words, migrants are the visible part of the story but not the architects of the system. Rome's bill is aimed at the visible part. Whether it addresses the architects is another question. Now, Italy doesn't operate alone. A huge piece of the anti-mass immigration playbook in recent years has been cooperation with transit states like Libya and Tunisia, partnerships that supporters credit for reducing arrivals and critics attack for outsourcing border enforcement to places with serious human rights concerns. Some reporting also notes that arrivals in 2025 were lower than earlier years, which the government links to these kinds of arrangements. And then there's the offshoring idea, processing asylum claims outside Italy or even outside the EU. Italy has pursued arrangements connected to Albania, and the return hubs, a third country processing concept, is increasingly part of the broader European conversation. But that offshoring is not a magic wand. It's expensive, legally complex, and politically explosive. So what awaits Italy and what awaits Europe if this bill moves forward? Expect three big outcomes. First, a harder operational posture at sea and a louder political posture at home. Even if the bill is modified in Parliament, the direction is set. More enforcement, more deterrence messaging, more pressure on rescue operations. Second, court battles and EU friction. The more aggressive the policy, the more likely it collides with constitutional challenges, EU law debates, and international obligations. That doesn't mean the policy won't happen. It means it will be contested, delayed, reshaped, and used as a political weapon on both sides. Third, the migration debate will shift from should we stop boats to what is the replacement system? Because enforcement can reduce arrivals at a given border at a given moment, but it doesn't erase the push factors or the demand for movement. If Europe wants fewer chaotic arrivals, it needs a strategy that includes credible deportations for those without asylum grounds, faster processing, lawful pathways for labor needs, and real integration that doesn't create parallel societies. Otherwise, you get the worst of all worlds: harsh rhetoric, unstable flows, and permanent political crisis. And that's the core reality. Italy is trying to prove that determination can control borders. The moral and legal question is whether this method actually controls the system, or